This is the Cancer Interviews podcast, and I'm your host, Bruce Morton. Our guest on this episode is downright unstoppable. Don Helgeson of Nanaimo, British Columbia, Canada, survived malignant melanoma, survived colorectal cancer, and more recently survived prostate cancer. His is a story that should be nothing shy of inspirational for anybody on a cancer journey, and now's the time to hear it. So, Don, welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Great to be here, Bruce.
First thing we want to do is the first thing we do with all of our guests, and that is to personalize them, to get to know them a little bit better, their life exclusive of cancer. So if you would, Don, tell us a bit about where you're from, what you've done for work, and when time allows for fun, what you do for fun.
Absolutely, Bruce. Well, I'm a 54-year-old recently retired Canadian Mountie living on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. I'm a father of 4 daughters. I also have 2 grandchildren. I'm married to my wonderful wife, Lisa, and I'm really doing my best to enjoy retirement.
As a Mountie, I have to ask, did you know much about riding horses before you became a Mountie?
A little bit. One of my daughters was quite involved in horses over the years as well. But to be honest with you, they stopped making Mounties ride horses in the late 60s. So the guys that do go around riding horses, and they call it the musical ride, they travel around the world, those are the only ones that actually get trained. So we wear the uniform, but it's mostly just for ceremonial purposes, the red serge uniform.
And when there's time for fun, what do you do for fun?
I'm a hockey player. I like to golf. I spend as much time as I can with my family, and especially with my wife. We're trying to get her retired as soon as we possibly can as well to join me in the mix. But I do also have 2 grandchildren that I mentioned. I take them to school a couple of days a week. They're basically my world right now. And as I said, being retired is fairly new to me. I'm learning as I go. And but yeah, I think family is my biggest thing.
Retirement, I'll tell you what, you will learn to like it. Now, let's talk about the 2 cancer journeys you were on prior to being diagnosed with prostate cancer. I'd like to take these on one by one, but first, if you would tell us briefly about your experience with malignant melanoma.
Yeah, when I'd been a Mountie for about 4 years at that point, young family. In fact, my youngest daughter at the time was just born, and I had gone in for a mole on my shoulder that had looked a little bit abnormal, and I didn't think much about it, and my doctor removed it. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, my doctor asked me to come back to his office and sat me down. Actually, I came in and he says, "You better sit down," and he advised me that I had malignant melanoma. I had no clue about that. That was when I was 27 years old, back in the mid 90s. And he was more worried about it than I was at the time, to be honest with you. At that age, I still think you think you're invincible. You can get away with just about anything. But it resulted in having a small surgery to have an area of tissue and skin removed. And fortunately for me, it was caught early on. And I ended up, other than annual checkups with a dermatologist, to this day, I haven't had any recurrence.
As for colorectal cancer, what happened?
Well, I go back just a little bit with that because I have Lynch syndrome. And Lynch syndrome is a genetic abnormality where we have trouble basically fighting off mutations of cancer cells, especially when they're becoming cancerous. And so that runs in my family. And my mother, at the age of 42, was diagnosed with colorectal cancer. And that was in the early 90s. And at the time, she had advised her siblings that she had been checked for colorectal cancer, and it was positive. And 2 of her 3 siblings who were younger than her were also checked and had colorectal cancer at the same time. So 3 of the 4 siblings, all in their late 30s and early 40s, had colorectal cancer. So, and that's the most common cancer that is associated with Lynch syndrome. And so I went in my mid 30s to make sure that I was clear, and lo and behold, I wasn't. And so the fact that my mother was so open about her journey and her diagnosis basically led to both of her siblings and myself to get checked and tackle the cancer at early stages.
As part of that journey, did you have to wear a colostomy bag?
It did not. So I was very fortunate. It was very touch and go. I went into the surgery told by my surgeon that I may or may not wake up with a colostomy. And I woke up and he was able to do an entire resection. And to this day, so that was in 2007. again, annual colonoscopies still since that time, and I remain cancer-free.
And that is fantastic news on every possible front as far as that journey goes. By the way, we're confident you'll be able to learn some tips and tools to help you through your personal cancer journey. But first, we'd like you to please give us a like, leave a comment or review below, and share this information with your friends. Kindly click on the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon. That way you'll be notified the next time we release one of our cancer interviews. And if you or a loved one are facing a cancer diagnosis, please click on the link in the description and show notes below to check out our free guide, The Top 10 Things I Wish I Knew When I First Got Cancer. Finally, we want to remind you that on cancer interviews, we are not purveyors of medical advice. If you seek medical advice, please contact a licensed healthcare professional. Now, Don, let's get to your diagnosis of prostate cancer. Was there a point in which you or your doctor noticed that something was abnormal, something wasn't quite right?
No, and that's the thing. I was 50 years old, turning 51. I had no symptoms that I knew of. I being in my 50s, I had some urinary issues as far as like my stream was a bit slower, but I just took that to be as part of the aging process. But one of my mother's brother, my Uncle Richard, he passed away from prostate cancer when he was 65 years old. And I saw him about a week before he passed, and we had a great conversation. Now, he had also had colorectal cancer in his 30s, as I mentioned earlier. And his last words to me were, make sure you get your blood work done to get checked. And I didn't really know an awful lot about, actually, I didn't know anything about prostate cancer at that point. And I learned within the next year what a PSA test was and what a prostate did, where it was in the body, as a result of going and getting that blood work done. So in short, my uncle has basically allowed me to get to the point that I'm at right now by giving me that advice. That advice was so invaluable. And I think of him every day because of that. Because when I went in and got my blood work done and mentioned to my doctor at the time, yeah, my uncle said I should get this done, he ticked the PSA box on my lab requisition. And thankfully he did, because my PSA came back in September of 2020 when I was, as I said, I was just turning 51 years old at a 12.2, which was about 4 times over what the average should be for someone my age. And that led to the next couple of months of many tests, poked and prodded all over the place, biopsies, CTs, MRIs, bone scans. And within a couple of months, it was confirmed I had what ended up being stage 3B prostate cancer.
Don, you were not in the same position as a lot of people when they get diagnosed with prostate cancer or any cancer, in that you had gone 2 rounds with cancer in the past. So I'm thinking that from an emotional standpoint, this left you at kind of a crossroads. Either you could feel very defeated because it's like, oh, I've gone through this twice and now here it is again. Or you could say, I've been diagnosed with cancer twice and I survived it twice. I'll survive it again. So at that crossroads, how did you feel when you got that horrific news?
So to take you back just a little bit on that particular day. So getting a high PSA reading does not necessarily mean you have prostate cancer, but I had the blood work earlier in the morning, and I went into the portal that afternoon sitting at home by myself while my wife was at work. And that's where I read this, the PSA, what it was. And so I went online to do some checking. And when I typed in, PSA 12.2, what does that mean? Well, I started to get some pretty crazy results. So I was going down the old rabbit hole pretty quickly. And fortunately for me, my wife came home from work shortly after that, and I reached out to a few friends and realized that I needed to just take a deep breath and see where this was. But I don't want to say embarrassed is what I felt, but I just felt, for someone who knew they needed to continue get checking, I was like, how did I get to be 50 years old and not know what a PSA test was, not know even what a prostate did or where it was in my body, as I mentioned earlier. And so fortunately for me, my medical team here where I live, they fast-tracked me to get me those tests that I needed, which ended up confirming I did have cancer. Now, that actually put me at ease in a strange kind of way, because I knew once once it was confirmed and my team was on my side, I got it. I knew that I had several different options available for me for different treatments, and I started reaching out to people to find out what they were. But the main thing that upset me about this was thinking about the consequences of the treatments for having prostate cancer, especially for someone my age. And I'm fairly newly married. It's my second marriage, and my wife and I actually will be celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary in about a week and a half. We were fairly newly married, and she's younger than me as well. So I started to I went down that road of really worrying about how that could affect my relationship with my spouse. And so that was the biggest part of it all. But I think, nothing up to that point had successfully taken me, and I knew that I had the fight in me. And so with help from my wife and also from a few friends and acquaintances who had experience with prostate cancer, I ended up making the decision to do the treatment that I ended up doing, which was surgery in early January 2021, which got me a couple of years of NED.
And with that surgery, though, how difficult was it thinking about your going forward with the lack of a prostate?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's lots of things to consider with having prostate cancer surgery. And one of them is, obviously ED. When I went into surgery, my surgeon, this particular surgeon said before I went in, there was no guarantees I'll salvage your nerves as a result of the surgery. So when you wake up, we'll have that conversation. Fortunately, he did salvage the nerves, but incontinence. So, again, my age, I would just turned 51 years old. And I'm thinking, am I going to have to wear, Depends the rest of my life? And so you're right. I mean, that has a huge, that plays on your mind an awful lot. And so but I knew even going into the surgery, I made sure I went in as healthy and as fit as I possibly could. I've always tried to do my best to do that, to be that way, believing that I want to defy some of the odds that there are for this. And so when I woke up from the surgery, the surgeon said, yes, I've salvaged your nerves. And then it was just the next thing. Okay, let's live with this catheter for what ended up being 16 days post-surgery. And then when I ended up getting that removed, I was actually feeling pretty good. And I just started getting active. And then I started speaking to people. And I think that's a big thing, Bruce, is my generation is more willing to reach out and talk to people than maybe like a lot of the people with prostate cancer, let's be honest, are a lot older than I am. So finding people my age wasn't the easiest thing to do, but I started to reach out and talk to people, and I ended up being surprised how many people my age actually were going through this. And I actually spoke to another Canadian Mountie who lives on the other side of Canada, who was just a few months behind me in the process. And he had some suggestions for me about what he was doing post-surgery, including taking a daily dosage. It ends up being a low dosage Cialis that had ended up being successful, helping me become successful down the road. So it's all about speaking to people, but also I think it's attitude, speaking to people, and willing to share. And so I know I'm kind of dominating this side of the conversation here, but what it did, all of this, once I had a high PSA reading, inside me, I said, I do not want anyone else my age to go through what I'm going through, whether that's not knowing what the future could hold, but I also didn't want men to not understand what a PSA reading was or getting a digital rectal exam, those things. So I've made it my mission to tell people, get your PSA checked. Make sure that when you go in for your annual checkups that you insist on the digital rectal exam, and trying to make sure that people understand what the prostate is. And so I've done that through, I had my own website. I wear t-shirts that say, what's your PSA? Trying to get the conversation started.
Hindsight is always 20/20, Don, but the vibe I'm getting from you is that you are glad you went with the prostatectomy. Is that fair to say?
It is. I'd been told, especially by my age, that radiation first could make things difficult down the road if I ever needed to have surgery or other treatments. And also having Lynch syndrome, what typically happens is that these cancers can become quite aggressive. And I was told that my prostate cancer was aggressive. And post-surgery, biopsy had shown that my prostate cancer was a Gleason 7, but post-surgery it was actually a Gleason 9. So looking back on it, I have zero regrets about choosing the surgery route. And I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit later, but I had quarterly PSA tests after that, which were all undetectable for 2 years. And then I had a blip happen in April of 2023, which I think we'll get into here.
One thing I want to mention is that anytime we have a guest who is diagnosed with prostate cancer, doctors tell them the same thing, even though there's a wide variance in the equation of how prostate cancer can be treated. And basically what the doctors say is, in terms of sexual function, in terms of urinary function, in a best case scenario, you're not going to be 100%. You're not going to be what you were. But if you could try to quantify, Don, because I think that that viewers are interested in this, if you could quantify with 100% being best, would you say sexual function is somewhere close to 100%?
Yes, and that was prior to my additional treatment that I took. I just recently had a recurrence, as you're aware. But post-surgery, as a result of taking the medication, Kegels, being healthy, exercising, all of that, I would probably say, 90-95% range.
That's outstanding. And you mentioned medication. What kind of medication did you take?
So I took, it was a generic brand Cialis, and it's a 5 milligram daily dosage. And that's all I took. And, but it's important to be like in a good headspace, a healthy relationship with my spouse. All of those things are factors. But I even surprised myself. And one thing I didn't mention earlier was as a result of having the surgery, it's recommended to do Kegel exercises pre-surgery and post-surgery. And I did all of that. Basically, Bruce, anything that I've been told by my medical team that could get me the best odds, I've done. And so, yeah, that's where I was at before the recurrence.
Okay, if you would quantify urinary function, how close are you to 100% with that?
Oh, I actually would say I'm probably like 150%. I surprised myself once when the catheter comes out, it's a bit of a scary time, to be honest with you, but I was also relieved. I just wanted that thing removed. And as I said, it was 16 days with the catheter. I had immediately had some leakage, and but it took me probably 4 to 6 months to basically get that under control. But the first time that I actually had to stand up to go to the bathroom, I stood over the toilet, and I just remember thinking to myself, what's this going to feel like? Like I was worried about there being pain, anything. And there was nothing, but I said, actually joked to my wife, I said, I feel like I'm a teenager again. Like I haven't gone to the bathroom like this in 30, 40 years. And it's still that way to this day.
Outstanding. I want to backtrack a little bit, Don, to the point prior to you being told that you were NED. Was there a juncture in which you hadn't got to NED status yet, but you felt like you were moving in the right direction, that you felt like NED was attainable?
Right from the very beginning, my medical team felt that although it was aggressive, that we'd gotten to it early. And so I just, in my mind, and again, I consider myself to be a very positive person. And so when I left surgery and my margins were very clear, I did have some spread to the seminal vesicles. My surgeon, who was also my urologist, and then my GP, were all very confident that, they knew there was a chance for recurrence, but they were confident that my odds were very, very decent. So I lived my life like I was NED, but I also lived my life where I continued to make sure I was making all those healthy choices, because and as I said, it did happen. If a recurrence was to happen, I wanted to hit that head on, right? And I wanted to make sure that I didn't have other health issues that were in the way of what I needed to do. So in my mind, I was NED, I was going to stay NED. And so when this bump happened, it was just another thing I had to tackle.
Don, you had mentioned the support you got from your wife, from family and friends, but sometimes support can also be welcome when it comes from an organization, and an organization that has been instrumental in your cancer journey is known as Man Up to Cancer. If you would, tell us about Man Up to Cancer, what it's done for you, and what it can do for other men.
Man Up to Cancer is an online community. Well, it started out as an online community that was founded by Trevor Maxwell back at the beginning of 2020. And I actually found the group as that 2-time cancer survivor for, as you said, melanoma and colorectal cancer in the spring of 2020, right when COVID-19 was hitting and we were all looking for things to fill the void. And I really, really liked the message that they had. And the message was is that you're not alone. You don't have to fight cancer alone. And basically, Man Up to Cancer is changing the way the men face cancer by trying to make sure that they have support. And at the time, support was like almost 100% virtual. So there were Zoom meetings, there were just even within the Facebook group that they have, people were able to communicate, and that led to some side conversations within Facebook Messenger. And so it was ideal for me because I didn't know at the time, but I actually had prostate cancer brewing. And so about 5-6 months after I joined, I get that diagnosis. I was able to go into the group, and that's where I connected with several men who were around my age, either when they had been diagnosed or currently were at that age. And I reached out to them to get some advice on, because I had to figure like radiation, surgery, did I just want to wait and see what it was doing? Those types of things, and active surveillance is what they call that. So it was invaluable to me. And so I still am a member to this day, and not only am I a member, I'm actually part of the leadership team for the group now. And I actually have a huge role that Trevor Maxwell has assigned me, and that is that I am what's called the chapter and meetup coordinator for the group. And we have over 50 chapters now that have been set up worldwide. And my job is to connect men. And fortunately now we are connecting men in person, not just virtually. We're connecting them in person all over the world. And so that's my role. I do that as kind of a side gig, and it's been something that's been extremely rewarding to me.
And you mentioned the word online at the very beginning. So if you would, can you share with us the web address for the website for Man Up to Cancer?
manuptocancer.org is the main web page. And the online community that I'm referring to is called The Howling Place. And that you can find if you query Facebook. And it is open to any man who is facing cancer and any man who is the caregiver for a spouse that is facing cancer.
And the Howling Place, that name, that moniker is tied to wolves. And I've been told by one of your Man Up to Cancer teammates that the nature of the wolf is something that Man Up to Cancer wants to link to battling cancer.
Yep. Stronger as a group, stronger as a pack. No lone wolf gets left alone. So when somebody's hurting, the rest of the group comes in, circles in, and makes sure that they're okay. And so we've taken that on. Well, it's 4.5 years. And so almost all the merchandise you see, the webpage, everything has that Howling Wolf.
Don, we're going to wrap up now, but we're going to wrap up the way we always do. You've already answered our signature final question to varying degrees throughout this interview. So part of your answer might be redundant, but in this case, I don't think redundancy is such a bad thing. If you encountered someone who had just been diagnosed either with prostate cancer or malignant melanoma, colorectal cancer, or any other type of cancer, you might have a great deal you would want to share with that person. But if there's one overarching thing, one thing you wanted to make sure got through, one thing that you would make sure that it resonated to that person, you had a one-on-one audience with them, what would that point be? What's the point you would want to make?
You don't have to go through this alone, and make sure that you reach out to others and get advice, speak to people who've gone through this.
Very simply stated. And Don, before we go, that web address for Man Up to Cancer one more time, please.
manuptocancer.org.
Very simply stated. Don Helgeson, Nanaimo, British Columbia, Canada. It has been a great story that you've shared with us. As mentioned at the top, one that should be of inspiration to anybody who's on a cancer journey or a loved one for anybody on a cancer journey. Don, thanks very much for being with us on Cancer Interviews.
Thank you, Bruce.
And we want to remind you, as we always do, that if you are on a cancer journey, as Don has mentioned, you are not alone. There are people out there like Don Helgeson. There are organizations like Man Up to Cancer that can aid your cancer journey during treatment and after treatment. So until next time, we'll see you on down the road.